Hi guys, and welcome back. We are in lecture 4 of a series of lectures on ACT grammar prep for Learn Strong. The idea here is simply that we want to give you enough information to help you prep for the ACT. We did some basic introductory things already in lectures 1 and 2. Then in lecture 3 we reviewed ACT prep grammar knowledge for nouns, okay? And now we're going to turn to pronouns. However, before we do that, I want to have a little bit more fun. It's like I've said to you before, hey guys, this is not that serious, and anybody that tries to make it that serious, you know, I'm trying to at least bring some levity to this whole thing. So let's play a little game, for example. Before there was an ACT, there was an SAT. It's fun to do a little bit of research about what the SAT actually stands for. Like, for example, those letters. I mean, we already asked this question about the ACT. Well, it depends again on who you ask and the time you ask. Do a little bit of research on this. I'm always amazed at the number of students who take these tests and never actually do any research to find out about these tests. For example, 1926, it was called Scholastic Aptitude Test. Scholastic, of course, suggests academic, right? Aptitude suggests talent, which suggests natural ability, kind of like an IQ test, and this troubled a lot of people. So, in 1933, the Scholastic Assessment Test. But doesn't assessment mean test? Which means the Scholastic test? Finally, in 1997, they cleared everything up by just simply saying that the SAT only means the SAT, which is kind of just like the ACT only meaning the ACT, or KFC meaning KF. Well, you do your own research on KFC. So what's the difference between the ACT and the SAT? That is a very good question. Stay tuned if you're interested in that one, and we'll talk about it later. I'm sharing this kind of intel with you so that you can have a little laugh. We don't need this study to be that serious, because it's not that serious. And just to remind, we are not trying to cover all of the rules, for example, of pronoun use, only the ones that we know that the ACT guys are going to put together for us. We want to be ready for that. That's the focus of these lectures and these talks, so let's make sure that we understand that. Let's turn to pronoun study, but before we get there, a couple of reminders. Again, this will be huge for this lecture, okay? Don't worry about the why of the rules, especially about these pronoun rules, because you're going to see some kind of what I'm going to call silly ones, okay? And they are silly rules, and I'll have more to say about it. The other suggestion I would make, and I've had students that say, this is a really interesting idea. I really do recommend that you make up your own examples for each of these rules we study. For example, I'm going to throw, obviously, some examples at you, but I really recommend that you make up your own for each of the major rules and then try to memorize the examples so you know it's right and it's yours, okay? And I'm going to say this, and sometimes, I mean, people get upset about this, but you know what? Your example is your example, so you can make it any way you want. You can even make it profane. Just don't share with anybody if you don't want to, right? You remember it because it makes you laugh, and if it helps you to remember it on an ACT, for example, in a situation where you're looking at a passage, you go, is that a mistake or is that correct? You can go back to your example and then you're good to go. Right? Try it. You know, just keep it to yourself. Now, I'll say this out loud. This is the longest lecture probably that we'll give. There's multiple parts to this thing, and it's certainly the most complicated because there's a lot of rules that we're going to have to go through, lots of ideas to share. So take this lecture slow, take good notes. When you've had enough, take a break, come back to the lecture later, and of course that's the beauty of us putting this thing on video, right? So let's go to work with it. Remember what our focus is here, okay, when we're studying grammar rules. We're going to ask two questions always about any rule. What is it, and how does it work? Again, I would really emphasize this one. What is it, and how does it work? For example, and just to review, for example, what's a gerund? Right? A verb acting like a noun, right? To swim is the verb form. Swimming is the noun form, right? Using the ending of ing. Okay? Swimming is fun, for example. Swimming is the noun, right? Swimming is the subject of the noun of the sentence, all right? So with all of that as kind of precursor, let's go ahead and turn to it now and to pronouns, and we'll ask simply the what is it question to get started, okay? Always, first of all, it's a thing, as we talked about before. It's often fuzzy, sometimes unclear, you know. For example, think about this. Everyone or everybody is ready to die. Wait, who is everybody or everyone, and I'm not part of that because I'm obviously not ready today. A pronoun substitutes, that is to say, takes the place of a noun or a thing. Okay? And the thing the pronoun substitutes for is called an antecedent, ante, A-N-T-E, that which comes before. Okay? For example, we played this guy, hey, would you give me that? See, she knows that I'm talking about a thing, right? But she's like, what are we talking about? Once she knows that I'm talking about a water bottle, the thing that represents or stands for, substitutes for, then she understands the sentence, right? So we have rules like, for example, you've got to make sure that this word that comes before, this thing that comes before, this antecedent is clear. We'll have more to say about this, obviously, all right? And of course, you can always think about this in a classroom. Is a substitute, as good as the actual teacher? Well, sometimes yes, sometimes no. I suppose it all depends, right? And the same will be true about pronouns in the English grammar as well. So, let's take a deep breath, get to work. If you start feeling overwhelmed, hit pause, go for a walk, come back. You can always review as well, right? Let's go slowly and figure this stuff out together, okay? Really, honestly, it is not that confusing. By the way, did you notice I used the pronoun it just now? What's the antecedent? It's what is not that confusing. You know it's a thing, right? And of course here I'm talking about the whole notion of about study of pronouns, right? The first question is, let's go ahead and ask it. Why do we need these things? I think this is a legitimate question. Sometimes students will ask this, what do we got to study this stupid stuff for? That is no throwaway question to me. I think that's a legitimate question. Let's at least try and explain it, okay? If they don't serve a purpose, these pronouns, then let's get rid of them. And we'll have more to say about this later, that some of these rules that we're going to talk about that ACT still tests for are actually kind of arcane and they're falling out of fashion rules. We'll talk about that, right? Watch this one though, okay? Jim walked out the door. Jim walked to Jim's truck. Jim turned on Jim's truck. Jim drove to Jim's work. Which obviously begs the seriously question. Why do we got to keep using the word Jim over and over again? Well, see, this is we could use pronouns so that we wouldn't have to keep using the subject Jim over and over and over again. So pronouns help us so we don't have to have this terrible repetition thing happening. They help make our speaking and writing easier. I'm going to point out usually easier. And the idea here is, of course, more clear. But sometimes they can actually cause more confusion than they help, right? There are probably more silly rules about pronouns in the English language than in any other part of speech or however we want to think about this. Okay? But, and this is huge, and I'm going to say it several times, the ACT people love to jack you up with questions about pronouns, all right? So let's figure it out, and that way you can write a higher score, which is the whole focus of these conversations with you, okay? The key with pronouns is choosing the correct pronoun. Most of the time we do it because our hearing is good, unless you're not a native speaker to the language, and then of course it can be difficult, right? ACT will focus on possible pronoun mistakes, issues of not understanding pronouns in several areas. I would write these down. Case, we'll obviously define each of these. Person, agreement, and then what we will call unclear or vague references. Again, one more time. This study is designed to increase your ACT IQ, if we can use that term, right? You're never going to be asked to define any of the rules we're about to go over. So for example, you're never going to be asked on the ACT to define what an antecedent is. No. It's going to be a matter of a mistake provided to you. So you have to develop what we will call an eye or an ear for what sounds right. Okay? And I'll use that kind of language repeatedly. Okay? We're going to start with this notion of case of pronouns. All right? What do we mean by this? Well, we're talking about the role each pronoun plays in a sentence. All right? We're going to start with personal pronouns. He, she, him, we, us, you. Okay? Your ear works most of the time. Think about this. Not let I go, but let me go. Unless, of course, you're interested in some kind of what Bob Marley lyrics or something like that, right? But sometimes it's not always that simple. Watch this one, for example. Is it I or is it me in this example? Mikey is a better student than blank. Is it I? Mikey's a better student than I? Or is it me? Mikey is a better student than me? Is there a way to know what's right? Because ACT is going to make sure that you are able to demonstrate that you know what's right. So let's investigate, all right, shall we? We've got personal pronouns, and they fall into two groups. And although I don't like to do a lot of this on whiteboards, here you go. Here are your two groups, okay? So we've got group one, subject pronouns. Group 2, object pronouns. Group 1, subject pronouns are what we call the nominative case. I would just write that down, and of course you can sound really intelligent the next time somebody wants to bring it up. And you can say, oh yes, the nominative case, that's the subject pronouns. Or group 2, the object pronouns are, of course, the objective case, okay? Now the easy way to understand this, and we'll get to the actual words themselves in a moment, is to just write down really quickly with quotation marks, blank will go for the subject pronouns, and blank, or give blank, quotation, give blank for the objective case. Watch this. And I think this will make a lot of sense to you right away. The nominative case pronouns are I, you, he, she, we, they. Notice how each one of these will work in this little contrivance we've made here. I will go, you will go, he will go, she will go, we will go, they will go. The objective case, give blank, will work with these words. Me, you, him, her, us, them. Give me, give you, give him, give her, give us, give them. Notice, for example, you can't say give he or give she, right? Doesn't make any sense, all right? Notice that you can't say him will go either, okay? Now, I would suggest right now that you stop the video, that you've got this information written down on your paper now. And I would suggest you take 10 minutes and literally memorize what I just said here. Hey, if you're serious about an ACT score, that will be a very valuable 10 minutes for you. Why? Because if you know this list, then you're going to understand how we use these words and when it's wrong. Again, reminding you, ACT is going to show you the mistake where it's been used incorrectly. Now, of course, ACT normally isn't going to show it to you if it's a simple one that everybody knows. It's going to be a little bit more complicated. We have to, obviously talk about that one, all right? The key, of course, is that subject pronouns, that's group 1, function differently from object pronouns, that's group 2. That's huge, okay? Case, again, I would write this down, refers to the role or the function of the two different groups. And again, hey, just a final comment. If I lose you going forward, stop and go back and rewind, okay? So that way you can understand this clearly, all right? Let's talk subject pronouns first, group 1. They name people, places, things. Or they perform some kind of action, okay? For example, she is strange. It was he who parked the truck. Not him who parked the truck. Both she and he are grammatical subjects, right, of these two sentences. Right, notice, who is strange and who parked the truck? That makes it a subject. The verbs in both sentences are forms of the verb to be. We'll have more to say about verbs in the next lecture. Or what we call being verbs, linking verbs, right? Is, was, were, has been, had been, will be. These verbs are always paired with subject pronouns. I would write that down. These verbs are always paired with subject pronouns. Hear how it sounds wrong, and by the way, we do this a lot. If you hear it wrong, then you'll know when it's right, right? Hear how it sounds wrong. Me is, him was, her has been, us will be. Of course, hear it right. I was, he is, we were. The players on the team were, there's your verb, Jim and I. She, he, these are predicate, more later, nominative from the first group. Now let's ask a question. Can object pronouns from the second group ever be the subject of a sentence? Hear it wrong, for example. Them are going to the mall. Yeah, no. Her, him, and me drove to the mall. This is okay in informal grammar, but not in formal ACT grammar. And this is one of those first moments where I'm going to say, we speak often informally, right? And it's going to sound fine, but when we're talking formal grammar with the ACT study and prep, not so much. Let's talk about the second group, object pronouns, okay? They refer to people, places, things acted upon. Examples, the truck carried them away, right? Not they away. He asked her to call him. Objects of the verb receive the action. Examples, for example, Chris invited, there's your verb, him, the object of the verb, to the party. Object pronouns are also used in prepositional phrases. Now we're going to have more to say about prepositional phrases, phrases that begin with prepositions, right? Of course, a preposition, again, just to remind, anything a squirrel can do to the log, in the log, on top of the log, around the log, between the log, all that kind of stuff, through the log, right? Let's hear some examples. Between you and me, to Ashley and him, among us women. I know that we women might sound right, but that's informal, okay? From her and him, with me and you. We're going to talk more about prepositions later. Think about using pairs of personal pronouns, all right? Don't mix subject and object pronouns in the same phrase. Hear it wrong, for example. She and them went to the mall. They and her are gone. What if you're not sure, though? This is an interesting question. What if you're not sure? The answer is, if you know one pronoun is correct, pick from the same group of either subject or object pronouns. If you're not sure, substitute from group 1, the subject, I, or substitute me from group 2, the object group. Let's practice, shall we? Let's play the game. Justin asked that he or him and she or her practice tennis. Well, substitute me into one of them. Justin asked that me practice tennis? No, that's clearly wrong. If I is correct, then that's group number 1. So he and she practice tennis. Let's think about pairing a noun and a pronoun. Josh and I, my dog and me, he and Steve, them and my friends. You choose the pronoun as though the noun didn't exist. You ignore what we call ignore the noun. For example, the coach and then you have an option, she or he or her, argued about playing time. Clearly the pronoun is the subject. So you just ignore the noun coach and then just listen and trust your ear, right? Does her argued about playing time sound right? The coach and her argued about playing time, right? No. You got to develop the ear for this, right? What about if the noun and the pronoun pair is the object of prepositions? For example, a bond developed between Joe and, is it I or me? A bond developed between Joe and I or me. Well, the between is obviously the preposition, right? What a squirrel can do to the log. Switch the order of the noun and the pronoun and hear it. A bond developed between me and Joe, not I and Joe. Does that make sense? Right? It's a very simple way. You just switch the order. Okay? What about using pronouns in comparisons? Let's talk about that. For example, using the word then or as, right? To complete the comparison using the verb that would follow naturally. Steve swims faster than she or her. Let's learn to read it like this. Steve swims faster than she or her swims. It's obvious that it's she swims and not her swims, right? This she pronoun comes from group 1. Again, back to our board, subject pronoun. Watch another example, for example. My sister has bigger hands than, is it I or me? Well, learn to read it like this. My sister has bigger hands than I do or me do. Obviously, it's I do. It's a little simple rule that can help you tremendously as you get ready for ACT prep. Let's keep going. One more time. Annie is as tough as he is. No, not him, because him is just sounds wrong. Okay? Let's talk about noun-pronoun combinations, all right? When a pronoun appears side by side with a noun, we girls, us men, just delete the noun. We or us seniors decided to skip prom. All you got to do is to delete the word seniors, and what is it? We decided to skip prom. Us seniors does not sound right. right? Let's try again. An award was presented to we or us seniors by the teachers. You remove the noun seniors and you have it presented to us. Present to we sounds obviously wrong. Let's practice, okay, just to review. Now again, the key is not to get it right, the what is it part, but to know why you got it right, the how does it work part. Keep doing it until it makes sense, till it sounds right. How about this one? Joe took my aunt and I or me to the show. Obviously, I or me receives the action, right? This is group 2. This is our object pronouns. So it's obviously me. Go back and look at the list again if you didn't memorize those lists. We hoped that Stacy and, another example, we hoped that Stacy and David would be there, and sure enough, we saw she, her, and he, him, sitting in the front. Ignore all the stuff in the beginning. We saw Stacy and David. They received the action. It's group 2 object pronouns, her and him. After the movie, one more example. David asked my aunt and I, or me, to go out. David asked I? No. David asked me? Yes. Notice who received the action, right? How about this one? Another example. Between you and I or me, the movie was terrible. Between is a preposition. What a squirrel can do to the log. You and me is the object of the preposition between, right? How about this one? Mikey is a better student than I or me. Finish with the verb again. Mikey is a better student than I am, not me am. Okay, are you with me so far? Let's review. Case